comes to certain issues compared to the Democrats. Let's bring in our gaggle for this. Former DNC spokeswoman Karen Finney, who will be hosting a new MSNBC show, 4 o'clock on weekends. That comes up next month. Reporter for the LA Times and Chicago Tribune, Matea Gold, and National Review's Jim Geraghty. Welcome all. Matea, I want to start with you. Also in here, and I want to put up these poll numbers. So the president's poll numbers are pretty good, over 50 these days. That's not bad in this polarized environment. But Republicans ahead of Democrats on the issue of guns, even with them on immigration, ahead of Democrats on the issue of the economy. So it's sort of like there's presidential good news.
Right.
But then when you go farther in, there's good news for Republicans.
And what's so fascinating is that President Obama was really supposed to have this great ally at his side for his second term, which was this non-profit advocacy group that was going to just focus on his legislative agenda, on guns, on immigration, on climate. And I think what we're seeing so far is it's a lot harder to transition that campaign apparatus he had into one focused on issues that can promote this agenda.
Yeah, Jim, the thing that jumped out at me more than any was the gun issue. And we know that this has been we've seen all these different polls. Here you had a narrow plurality, not a majority, but a narrow plurality saying they agree more with Republicans on the issue of guns than Democrats.
Yeah, I mean, one thing is, the question is how you word a poll question. You have very different results. That's one of what people say, you figure the 90% number that the gun control advocates keep invoking, like it's a magic wand. It's going to suddenly make everybody convert that way. And yet, strangely enough, a whole bunch of Republicans and 4 of those Democratic senators didn't vote the way they wanted to. I think you look at these numbers, it becomes very clear. Obama is more popular than his agenda is. And a lot of people personally like him. They like when they see him doing his picks on ESPN, or Michelle Obama talking about her whole garden in the White House. All these kind of personal factors make people like the president, even if they don't necessarily agree with the president.
Karen, respond to that, because there is a gap.
Yeah.
There's clearly a gap, and this White House has struggled with doing what Matea just described. How do you take this great campaign ability and turn it into government?
I think there's 2 things. Number one, it has to be more targeted at the members themselves. And by that I mean, I thought for a long time that it's great that the Newtown families, for example, were on Capitol Hill, but unless you have a family with a story from Texas appealing to Ted Cruz, putting ads on television in the state of Texas where there is an electoral consequence,
heat in their
exactly, then it's very easy for him to meet with them but vote against. And so I think part of what they need to be doing is put more direct pressure on those members of Congress than I think they have. Number 2, I disagree with the idea, though, that you can read from this that the agenda is not what's popular. I think there's overall just a disgust with Washington, period, and a frustration. So I think
it's probably dragging him down a little bit.
It is, and I think it's hard to suss through. I mean, when you have 90% here, but then a little bit of a gap here, I think it's hard to know what's really going on there.
All right, Benghazi and Hillary Clinton. Jim, I'll start with you. You've been very, you just tweeted something I thought was interesting. You said, ignore the political posturing, essentially, that was going on with the Hill guys a little bit. Focus on Greg Hicks. Focus on the testimony.
I don't care that much about what the members on the Government Reform Committee said. I care about what the witnesses said. And not to pick a bone with any coverage on Daily Rundown or anything, but if this ends up having no impact on Hillary Clinton in 2016, fine. Well, let's get the facts set. Let's figure out why the decision-making before the night, the decision-making on that night, and the decision-making and the explanation after that night.
But Matea, it does feel like, though, you can't separate the politics from this. When you saw yesterday, when you got, every reporter was inundated with a lot of partisan-style heated campaign
and here we thought
going after Hillary.
And here we thought it was way too early for her supporters to set up a super PAC on her behalf, and it turns out she does need some air cover. But I think that we also should look at it through the present-day political lens, which is this is about Obama's vulnerability and something that was his strength, which is foreign policy.
I'm just quickly going to say that's what the ARB was supposed to have done, right? Take the nonpartisan look.
Not interviewing Hillary Clinton is a big. Now looks really bad.
But if we're now saying Hicks is what the issue is, I mean, point being that Hicks was in Tripoli, so and the ARB looked at everything from all the different perspectives. So I think we have to keep that in mind, because his perspective is colored by where he was, and that's only one part of the story.
But the ARB would have more credibility had they interviewed Secretary Clinton.
That may be
and that was probably now.
That may be true.
It's a very old story of the people at the top blaming the people beneath them.
Yeah, there you go. Shameless plug. Matea, you first.
So I think if you want to follow immigration reform, you have to be reading the LA Times and my colleagues.
Really? Only the LA Times?
Not only, but primarily.
I like it. Don't forget the Chicago Tribune.
And Chicago Tribune, yeah.
All right, Mr. Geraghty.
It is Teacher Appreciation Week, so I just want to announce I appreciate Alexandria Public Schools and Bright Start Preschool.
But that means I appreciate Arlington Public Schools.
Well, there
take that, Alexandria.
We don't have to donate that.
I'm going to just ask everybody to remember that we've got 66,000 troops still on the ground in Afghanistan. I've got one in particular that I care very dearly about, and I just want them to come home safe. I want them all to come home.
All right. Thank you all. That's it for this edition of the Daily Rundown.